It's up a cold February night in 2004. A young nursing student crashes her car on a quiet stretch of Route 112 in rural New Hampshire. When police arrive, her car is there. The airbags deployed, a cracked windshield, a box of wine on the back seat, but no sign of Maura Murray. No footprints leading into the woods, no signs of a struggle, just gone. What happened on that lonely road has haunted investigators, her family, and true crime communities for nearly 2 decades. This is the story of Maura Murray, the girl who vanished into the snow. To understand the mystery, we first need to understand Maura. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She was bright, athletic, and deeply loved by her friends and family. Those close to her describe her as shy but fiercely determined, a perfectionist with a soft heart. She came from a large, close-knit family in Hanson, Massachusetts. Her father, Fred, was especially protective of her. She had served in the West Point cadet program before transferring to UMass to study nursing, an ambitious, disciplined young woman with her entire life ahead of her. But beneath the surface, Maura's life wasn't as picture-perfect as it seemed. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she was showing signs of stress. There were personal struggles, academic pressure, a possible breakup, and an incident at work that left her shaken. On the evening of February 5, 2004, Maura emailed her professors saying she'd be out for a week due to a family emergency. But there was no family emergency. Instead, Maura packed her car with clothes, textbooks, and personal items, withdrew nearly $300 in cash, and began driving north. Where she was going, and why, remains one of the biggest mysteries in true crime. It was a bitterly cold night in Haverhill, New Hampshire, February 9, 2004. Snow drifted quietly across Route 112, the kind of night when sound seems to vanish into the woods. At 7:27 p.m., a local woman peered out her window and saw a dark sedan off the road, nose buried in a snowbank. The car's headlights still glowed faintly through the falling snow. Beside it stood a young woman, bundled against the cold, inspecting the damage. The woman who spotted her thought she looked shaken but not hurt. Within moments, she picked up her phone and called 911. The young woman beside the car was 21-year-old Maura Murray. She had been driving alone, headed north from her campus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst toward the White Mountains, a drive that should have taken her about 3 hours. No one knew why she was there. A neighbor named Butch Atwood, a school bus driver returning home from his route, stopped when he saw the crashed vehicle. He asked if she needed help. Maura told him she was fine, that she had already called for roadside assistance. She didn't appear injured, just cold and anxious. Atwood offered to call the police anyway, but she politely refused. He drove home, parked his bus just a few hundred feet away, and called 911 himself. When the first state trooper arrived just 18 minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car sat askew in the snowbank. Airbags deployed, the windshield cracked. The doors were locked and her belongings were still inside. Clothes, toiletries, textbooks, even her favorite stuffed animal. The trooper noticed a box of wine on the back seat. One container partially spilled near the driver's door. There was a red stain on the interior ceiling, likely from the wine. But there was no blood, no footprints in the snow, no sign that anyone had walked away from the car. That discovery immediately puzzled investigators. The snow had fallen recently, soft enough to preserve any tracks. If Maura had run into the woods, there would have been prints leading somewhere. Instead, there was nothing. The scene was eerily still, as if time had frozen the moment she vanished. Officers fanned out along Route 112, scanning the ditches and tree lines with flashlights. K9 units were brought in before midnight. The dogs picked up her scent and followed it for roughly 100 yards east, then stopped abruptly in the middle of the road. No turnoff, no continuation. The trail ended as though she had been lifted into the air. That's when police began to suspect that Maura might have accepted a ride from someone passing through. The following morning, as daylight broke over the frozen landscape, the search expanded. Local officers, firefighters, and volunteers combed the area on foot. Helicopters circled overhead. Searchers trudged through snowdrifts, shouting Maura's name into the silence. Her father, Fred Murray, arrived from Massachusetts and joined the search himself. He walked miles of back roads, knocking on doors, showing photographs, pleading for any clue. His voice trembled with exhaustion when he told reporters, "She didn't just run away, someone took her." But every lead evaporated. No footprints, no dropped items, no sign of struggle. The car's airbags had gone off, but investigators found no trace of blood on them. It seemed impossible. A 21-year-old woman had crashed her car, and within minutes, she had disappeared without a trace. Police began to dig into Maura's recent past, hoping to find context. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. Just days earlier, Maura had been involved in another car accident near her father's home in Massachusetts. It had been minor, but she'd been distraught afterward, crying, apologizing repeatedly, saying she'd messed up. There were also signs she'd been struggling emotionally in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She had recently been caught using a stolen credit card to order food, and a disciplinary hearing loomed. On top of that, her relationship with her boyfriend Billy seemed strained. On the day she vanished, Maura emailed her professors saying she'd be gone for a week due to a family emergency. But there was no family emergency. She then packed her car with clothes, textbooks, and toiletries, enough for a few days away, and withdrew nearly $300 in cash. She stopped at an ATM, then at a liquor store. Those were her last confirmed sightings before Route 112. The contents of the car told two different stories. The packed bags suggested a planned trip, maybe even an escape. But the leftover belongings, her phone charger, her makeup, personal items she never traveled without, hinted that she intended to return. As the hours turned into days, theories began to multiply. Had she wandered into the woods and succumbed to the cold? The night of her disappearance was below freezing. Hypothermia could set in within minutes. Yet search teams found nothing. Had she been picked up by a passerby who harmed her? Or had she planned to vanish all along, leaving her old life behind? The idea of Maura running away gained traction online. People pointed to the email to her professors, the packed car, the printed directions to Burlington, Vermont. Others argued that nothing about her background suggested she wanted to disappear forever. She had a loving family, career goals, and no history of self-destructive behavior. Then came the whispers. Rumors of suspicious locals, strange vehicles seen near the crash site, anonymous tips that led nowhere. The case had begun to outgrow the small town that first investigated it. Weeks later, when the snow began to melt, police searched again. Ditches, riverbanks, abandoned cabins. Still nothing. It was as though the earth had swallowed her whole. By spring, the investigation had gone cold. Leads dried up and speculation flourished. Online forums dissected every detail: her ATM withdrawal, her emotional state, even the angle of her crashed car. Everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. The facts remained maddeningly simple. A young woman drove into the mountains on a winter night. She crashed her car on a quiet road. She spoke to a neighbor, appeared uninjured, and within a 20-minute window she was gone. No witness ever saw her again. To this day, that brief moment between the 911 call and the officer's arrival remains the most haunting gap in the story, the space where Maura Murray slipped from the world we know into the unexplainable. By the time the first week passed with no trace of Maura, the case had already begun to take on a life of its own. Every unanswered question became a breeding ground for theory and speculation. The people of Haverhill whispered. Reporters camped out on Route 112, and true crime enthusiasts from across the country began to pick apart every detail of the case. Everyone wanted to know what really happened to Maura Murray. Some investigators believed she had simply run away. They pointed to her final days at the University of Massachusetts, the email to professors claiming a family emergency, the boxes packed neatly in her dorm room, and the directions to Burlington, Vermont printed from her computer. To them, this looked like someone planning an escape, not an accident. But if she ran away, where did she go? Why would she take such a dangerous route in the middle of winter? And why leave behind her wallet, her ID, and every traceable connection to her life? Others proposed a more chilling theory, that Maura accepted a ride from a stranger. The canine scent trail stopping in the middle of the road seemed to fit that narrative. Maybe someone pulled over, offered help, and she climbed in. Perhaps she was hurt, cold, disoriented, and desperate for warmth. If that was true, who was that driver? And why did they never come forward? Then there was the possibility of an accident, that Maura, frightened and possibly intoxicated after the crash, wandered off into the woods and succumbed to the freezing temperatures. It's a theory that seems logical on paper, yet despite multiple ground and aerial searches, not a single trace of her was found. No clothing, no body, no evidence. For a young woman to vanish in such a small search area defied reason. Online, the case began to evolve into something else entirely, an early internet mystery. Blogs, message boards, and amateur sleuth communities sprang up, dissecting every police report and photograph. People began to analyze her last ATM footage frame by frame, speculating on her body language, her expression. They mapped her exact driving route, measuring distances between the liquor store, the crash site, and her dorm room, hoping to spot inconsistencies. Some even claimed there was something sinister about the timeline, that police arrived too quickly, that locals were hiding something, that there might be a cover-up. In those early years, the internet turned Maura into a symbol, the missing girl who represented every unsolved disappearance that haunted the public imagination. The theories grew darker. Some suggested she had a secret life, that she'd been pregnant, that she had a second cell phone or was meeting a mysterious man up north. There was no proof for any of it, yet the speculation spread like wildfire. And then came the human angle, the question of Maura's mental state. Those close to her admitted she had seemed stressed and withdrawn before she vanished. Between school pressure, family issues, and her recent car accident, some wondered if she'd reached a breaking point. Could she have intended to end her life somewhere secluded, far from everything she knew? Her family rejected that idea immediately. They knew Maura as tough, rational, grounded. Her sister Julie later said, she might have been overwhelmed, but she wasn't the type to give up. Still, investigators couldn't ignore the inconsistencies. Why lie about a family emergency? Why withdraw cash, buy alcohol, and head north without telling anyone? Why pack her things neatly in her dorm, as though closing one chapter of her life? Every clue seemed to lead in two directions, one suggesting a young woman seeking peace and solitude, the other hinting at fear and escape. As months turned into years, the lack of evidence only made the theories more extreme. Some believed Maura was living under a new identity, hidden somewhere in Canada or Vermont. Others were convinced she had been abducted, her remains hidden somewhere deep in the New Hampshire woods. There were even whispers about involvement from someone close to her, a theory her family found deeply painful. For investigators, each lead circled back to the same frustrating truth. There was no definitive proof of anything, no suspects, no witnesses, no digital trail, just a car, a few minutes of confusion, and a young woman who vanished into the dark. Even today, that uncertainty is what grips people the most. Every theory sounds plausible until it collapses under its own contradictions. Every answer raises two new questions, and in that tension between logic and mystery lies the haunting power of Maura Murray's story. Because in the end, the only certainty is this: something happened on Route 112 that night, and the truth, whatever it is, disappeared with her. The years passed, but Maura Murray's name refused to fade from public memory. Each anniversary brought fresh speculation, new articles, and renewed searches by those who couldn't let her story rest. Her disappearance wasn't just another missing person case anymore. It had become a haunting legend, one that blended tragedy, obsession, and the desperate human need for closure. Law enforcement never closed the file. Detectives from the New Hampshire State Police continued to field tips, some credible, most not. For a time, even the FBI assisted, combing through old evidence and re-interviewing witnesses. But with no crime scene, no physical remains, and no verified sightings, there was little to work with. Then, in 2019, a discovery reignited hope. Hikers near Loon Mountain, roughly 5 miles from the crash site, stumbled upon what appeared to be fragments of human bone. For a moment, the true crime community went silent. After 15 years of false starts and dead ends, could this finally be her? The remains were sent for forensic testing. Weeks later, the results came back. They did not belong to Maura Murray. It was another blow to her family, another promise of answers that dissolved into nothing. Over the next few years, technology advanced, and cold case investigators revisited the evidence with new tools. Ground-penetrating radar, DNA testing, and forensic genealogy were applied to old leads that once seemed dead. In 2021, investigators conducted a significant search of a property on Route 112, a small house not far from where Maura's Saturn had been found. The search followed new information and radar readings indicating disturbed soil beneath the foundation. For days, locals watched as police and forensic teams worked carefully around the property. Excavators dug, cadaver dogs were brought in, and crime scene tape fluttered in the winter wind. But once again, after a week of effort, authorities confirmed there was nothing there. No remains, no trace of Maura, just more questions. Her family, though weary, refused to give up. Fred Murray, who had spent years battling to keep his daughter's case in the public eye, continued to press law enforcement for answers. He believed there were people in the area who knew more than they had ever told. As he grew older, his search became a mission of legacy, to ensure that someone somewhere kept fighting for Maura. His daughter Julie took on that role, becoming the public face of the family's search. Julie Murray used social media and podcast interviews to reframe the narrative. She reminded the world that her sister wasn't a ghost story or a riddle, she was a person. "People forget that she's not a myth," Julie said in one interview. "She's real, she's our sister, and we're still waiting for her to come home." Meanwhile, online interest only grew stronger. New podcasts, YouTube documentaries, and Reddit threads brought the case to younger generations. For some, Maura's disappearance represented the early age of internet sleuthing, when ordinary people tried to solve mysteries that official investigations could not. But for others, it became an uncomfortable example of how public obsession can blur the line between justice and intrusion. Over the years, strangers have traveled to the site of the crash, a quiet bend on Route 112 where the road curves between the trees. They leave flowers, ribbons, and handwritten notes tied to the guardrail. Locals sometimes find coins, bracelets, or candles placed near the spot. To many, it's a sacred place, the last confirmed point of contact between Maura and the world. Yet for investigators, it's also the epicenter of confusion. Every clue begins there, and every trail ends there. Even now, occasional tips trickle in. A witness claims to have seen a similar car. Someone hears a rumor at a bar. A psychic sends a letter claiming to know where Maura's body lies. The state police treat each one seriously, but nearly all end the same way. No evidence, no confirmation, no closure. More than 20 years later, the file remains open, classified as a missing person case with suspected foul play. Detectives who weren't even on the force in 2004 now inherit the burden of the mystery. They pore over old interviews, faded photos, and maps marked with red circles. The case endures like a cold wind through the mountains, constant, unrelenting, unsolved. Maura Murray would be in her early 40s today. Her family imagines the life she could have had, a career in nursing, maybe a family of her own, a future that was stolen or surrendered somewhere along that dark, snowy road. The truth is, we still don't know what happened that night. Every theory remains both possible and flawed, every clue both meaningful and meaningless. What began as a simple car accident became a national obsession, a story about fear, loss, and the limits of what we can ever truly know. For those who've studied this case for decades, one question lingers: how can someone disappear so completely in a place so small in a time so short? The answer, like Maura herself, remains just out of reach, somewhere between the headlights, the snow, and the silence. Time has a way of softening the edges of most stories, but not this one. For Maura Murray's family, the passing years haven't brought clarity or peace. Only questions that echo louder with time. Fred Murray still keeps her photo on his nightstand, a reminder of the daughter he refused to stop searching for. He once said that every time his phone rings, a small part of him still believes it could be her. That hope, fragile as it may be, has carried the family through 2 decades of heartbreak. For Julie, Maura's sister, the fight became personal in a different way. She spent years correcting misinformation, pushing back against rumor, and reminding the public that behind every headline is a real person, not a symbol, not a mystery to be solved for entertainment. "She's my sister," Julie said in an interview. "She wasn't perfect, but she mattered. She deserves truth, not theories." The internet helped keep Maura's name alive, but it also distorted her story. Online forums and podcasts turned her into a character in a never-ending narrative, debated by strangers who never met her. People analyzed her smile, her posture, her choices. They speculated about her secrets, her fears, even her last thoughts. But lost in all of that noise was the simple truth. Maura Murray was a real young woman who vanished in terrifying circumstances, and no one has ever been held accountable for it. The longer a case remains unsolved, the more the world starts to fill the silence with its own versions of the truth. It's human nature. We crave closure. We need resolution. But the Murray family has had to live in that silence every day. For them, this isn't a puzzle. It's a wound that never healed. Investigators often say that time can be both an enemy and an ally. Witnesses forget details, evidence deteriorates, but people change too. Guilt weighs heavier with age. Secrets slip out when least expected. That's why Julie and her family never stop telling Maura's story, because the moment the world forgets, the chance of truth fades with it. For many who followed the case, Maura's disappearance represents something larger, a reminder of how fragile ordinary moments can be. A drive, a decision, a curve in the road, and suddenly, life can fracture in a way that never makes sense again. When you look at the photographs of Maura, she looks like anyone's sister, anyone's daughter. In one photo, she's smiling on a track field. In another, she's sitting by a campfire with friends. Those pictures capture the kind of youth that feels invincible, and maybe that's what makes her story so haunting. She could be anyone. And yet the space she left behind is enormous. It's not just the mystery of where she went, it's the ripple effect that reached her family, her friends, and even strangers who never knew her. The community that formed around her disappearance, both online and in the real world, became a strange kind of memorial, built on hope and obsession in equal measure. Fred once said that what keeps him going isn't set belief in miracles, but belief in people. Someone knows something, he said. Someone saw her, someone remembers, and someday they said it'll talk. There's a small blue ribbon tied to a tree along Route 112, just a few feet from where her Saturn crashed that night. Locals still see fresh flowers placed there from time to time. Some are from family, some from strangers who feel connected to her story. It's a quiet place. No cameras, no reporters, just the whisper of wind through the trees. If you stand there long enough, you can almost imagine the headlights cutting through the snow, the cars skidding off the road, the silence that followed. It's not just a spot on a map anymore. It's a marker of absence, a reminder of how easily a person can slip out of the world. Perhaps that's why the case endures. Because Maura's story forces us to face something uncomfortable, that even in an age of constant surveillance, cell towers and DNA databases, someone can still vanish completely without a trace, without closure, without justice. Every year, the anniversary of her disappearance draws people back to that lonely stretch of highway. Some come to remember, others come to wonder. All of them leave with the same feeling, that somewhere just beyond what we can see, the truth about Maura Murray still waits to be found. Maybe one day a new technology, a forgotten witness, or a simple confession will finally break the silence. Until then, her story remains suspended in time, a mystery frozen beneath the snow, waiting for the world to listen again. Because the question isn't just what happened to Maura Murray. It's how does a story like this end, when it never really ends at all? If you have any information about the disappearance of Maura Murray, please contact the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. Even the smallest detail, something forgotten, something overheard, could be the missing piece that finally reveals what happened on that winter night. And if this story stayed with you, don't let it fade into another unsolved headline. Share Maura's story. Talk about it. Keep her name alive, because attention is more than awareness. It's pressure, and pressure keeps cases like this from disappearing into the archives. Before you go, I want to leave you with a question. What do you think happened to Maura that night on Route 112? Did she leave by choice, escaping something we'll never fully understand, or did she cross paths with someone who meant her harm? What theory feels most true to you, and why? Let's talk about it in the comments. I read them all, and your insights often help shape future investigations we cover here on the Justice Vault. If this is your first time here, welcome. We tell real stories about real people with the respect and depth they deserve. No dramatization, no exploitation, just truth, empathy, and a search for justice. So if you believe every story deserves closure, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. Every week, we dive into new mysteries, both solved and unsolved, shining a light on the people the world forgot. Because sometimes remembering is the first step toward justice. This is the Justice Vault. Thank you for watching. And tomorrow, wherever you are, may you finally find peace.